Hello and welcome back. In this video, I will be continuing the subject of idolatry. My first video in this series, I discussed the Asherah poles and ancient and modern-day phallic symbols that are found all around the world, also known as Ashtoreth, who was worshipped together alongside the pagan false god and idol Baal. In this video, I'll be discussing Baal in further detail. Baal, sometimes called Bel, B-E-L, was the supreme god among the Canaanites. Here's a few images of Baal. Baal had many faces and different names. Baal of Peor, as he was sometimes called, was considered the sun god. The worship of Baal of Peor also involved Ishtar, or the Ashtoreth poles. His mistress, the fertility goddess Asherah, gave birth to many gods. There appears to have been only one Baal, who was manifested in lesser Baals at different places and times. Over the years, Baal became the dominant deity. The people of each territory or in each wandering clan worshipped their own Baal as the chief deity of each, the source of all the gifts of nature, the mysterious god of their fathers. As the god of fertility, all the produce of the soil would be his, and his adherents would bring to him their tribute of first fruits. He would be the patron of all growth and fertility, and by the use of the analogy characteristic of early thought, this Baal would be the god of the productive element in its widest sense, originating perhaps in the observation of the fertilizing effect of rains and streams upon the receptive and reproductive soil. Baal worship became identical with nature worship. Joined with the Baals, there would naturally be corresponding female figures which might be called Ashtartes or Ashtoreth. Baal is used for various gods who were patrons of cities in the land of Canaan. A Baalist, or a Baalite as they were called, means a worshipper of Baal. Since Baal means Lord, it can refer to any god and even to human officials. In some texts, it is used as a substitute for Hadad, a god of rain, thunder, fertility, and agriculture, and the Lord of heaven. So Baal refers to any number of local spirit deities worshipped as cult images, each called Baal and regarded in the Hebrew Bible in that context as a false god. Because more than one god bore the title Baal, and more than one goddess bore the title Baalat or Baalah, only the context of a text can indicate which Baal is really meant. Though the god Hadad or Adad was especially likely to be called Baal, Hadad was far from the only god to have that title. In the Canaanite pantheon, Hadad was the son of El, who had once been the primary god of the Canaanite pantheon. The Bible speaks of the Baals in the plural many times because there were many Baals that were worshipped by different cultures under different names. The name Baal was appropriated to the principal male god of the Phoenicians. Here's a picture of a map of ancient Phoenicia so you can see what that looks like here. Baal is found in several places in the plural form Baalim, and that can be found in Judges chapter 2, 1 Kings chapter 18, Jeremiah chapter 2, and Hosea chapter 2 and other places. Baal is identified also with Molech in Jeremiah chapter 19. It was known to the Israelites also as Baal Peor, the account in Numbers chapter 25 and Deuteronomy chapter 4. This Baal of Peor was worshipped till the time of Samuel, and was afterwards the religion of the 10 tribes in the north in the time of wicked King Ahab. We'll be talking about that king later. It prevailed also for a time in the 2-tribe kingdom of Judah in the south, till finally put to an end by the severe discipline of the captivity to Babylon in the year 587-586 BC. The priests of Baal were in great numbers and of various classes. Their mode of offering sacrifices is described in 1 Kings chapter 18. The sun god under the title Baal or Lord was the chief object of worship of the Canaanites. Each locality had its special Baal, and the various local Baals were summed up under the name of Baalim, or lords. Each Baal had a wife, who was a colorless reflection of himself. Here's a list of Baal's names, but there were many others. One of them was Baal Gad, or Lord of Good Fortune. Baal Haman, Lord of Wealth. This particular god, people offered their children sacrifices to him. Baal Hazor, Baal's village. Baal Meon, Lord of the Dwelling. Baal Peor, we've touched on him, means Lord of the Opening. That's something we'll talk about later, what that opening means. Baal Tamar, Lord of the Palm Tree. And Beelzebub was the form of the name of Baal, who was worshipped at the Philistine city of Ekron. In the New Testament, the Greek form of Beelzebub, or Beelzebul, a name used by Jesus Christ in reference to Satan. And we can find that in Matthew chapter 12, verse 24. Here it says, "Then was brought to him a man afflicted by a demon who was blind and mute. And he healed him, so that the mute man spoke and saw. And all the multitudes were amazed and said, 'This cannot be the Son of David, can it?' But when the Pharisees heard it, they said, 'This man does not cast out demons except by Beelzebul, the ruler of the demons.' And knowing their thoughts, he said to them, 'Every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself will not stand. And if the adversary casts out the adversary, he is divided against himself. How then will his kingdom stand?' So, as Jesus said, Satan is the ruler of the demons, and he is called Beelzebub or Beelzebul. So he is the greatest Baal, and people who worshiped the Baals were in fact worshiping Satan himself. Baal won his dominance by supposedly defeating the other deities, including the god of the sea, the god of storms, also the false gods of rain, thunder, and lightning, and the god of death. Baal's victory over death was thought to be repeated each year when he returned from the land of the dead, the underworld, bringing rain to renew the earth's fertility. Hebrew culture viewed the sea as evil and destructive. So Baal's promise to prevent storms and control the sea, as well as his ability to produce abundant harvests, made Baal worship attractive to the Israelites. It's hard to know why the Israelite people failed to see that Yahweh alone had the power over these things. Possibly their desert origins led them to question God's sovereignty over fertile land, or maybe it was just simply the sinful pagan practices that attracted them to Baal. Baal is portrayed as a man, oftentimes with the head and horns of a bull, an image similar to that in biblical accounts. You see a picture of that here. His right hand, sometimes both hands are raised, and he holds a lightning bolt, signifying both destruction and fertility. Baal has also been portrayed seated on a throne, possibly as the king or lord of the gods. The land of Canaan was devoted to the worship of Baal. The Canaanites believed that Baal was in absolute control over nature and over people. They believed that the only god who was superior to Baal was his father El. But Baal was the principal deity of the land. It was he who was in charge of the rain and the weather, and man's survival was dependent upon Baal's provision. One may question that those ancient enemies of Israel were as evil as the Bible claims they were. But even a superficial glance at Canaanite religion, any person can see the great evil in their religion of idolatry. Satan has always used immorality as one of his many tools to snare people, and sex worship was very prevalent in the worship of Baal, and religious prostitution was even commanded. Sexual acts by both male and female temple prostitutes were understood to arouse Baal, who then brought rain to make Mother Earth fertile when crops were abundant. Baal was praised and thanked for his abundant rain. These temple prostitutes would perform homosexual acts on anyone regardless of gender. The act itself was the means by which the participants were joined to or became one with Baal. The act itself was the means of worship by which Baal was sought to cross over and indwell in the participants. So they became full of the spirit of the devil, which occurs in most of idolatry. One of Baal's names, Baal of Peor, means cleft or gap, from the word pa'ar, meaning to open wide. Baal Peor, Lord of the Opening, a god of the Moabites mentioned in the Bible in Numbers chapter 25, was worshipped by obscene rites, so-called from Mount Peor, where this worship was celebrated. The goddess Ashtoreth was the representation of the female genital part, while Molech was a representation of the male genital part. While all immoral sex acts were considered an homage to Baal, the worship of Baal Peor was considered to be most obscene. The temples had dedicated male and female prostitutes, priests and priestesses, and anal and oral sex were practiced by same-sex or opposite sex in order to commune with Baal Peor. While male prostitutes participated in the act, only the feminine principle was glorified. Man had to sacrifice his manhood to join in the act. In either case, he effeminized himself. This brought glory to Baal Peor because the worshiper had to abase himself both physically and spiritually before the cleft. The rites of Baal Peor only exalt the woman principle. Through the worship of Baal Peor and the immorality involved, Satan was able to ensnare the nation of Israel. Worship of Baal Peor was introduced in the Bible in Deuteronomy chapter 4. Let's read about that. Chapter 4, verse 1. Now Israel, listen to the statutes and to the ordinances that I teach you, to do them, that you may live and go in and possess the land that Yahweh, the God of your fathers, gives you. You must not add to the word that I command you, nor are you to diminish it, that you may keep the commandments of Yahweh your God that I command you. Your eyes have seen what Yahweh did because of Baal Peor. For all the men who followed Baal Peor, Yahweh your God has destroyed them from the midst of you. But you who were faithful to Yahweh your God are all alive to this day. This story is about Balak, who was the king of the Moabites. He hired a man called Balaam, who was a prophet for hire, to curse Israel. Balak had seen the progress and might of Israel and was trying to do something that would stop them. Balaam took the money but was unable to curse Israel because Yahweh would not allow him to do so. Balaam then met with the king of Moab and hatched a plan to use against the Israelite men, and so they planned on seducing them into idol worship through the Midianite women. Then God himself would curse them. So this plan worked out, unfortunately, and cost around 24,000 Israelite lives because of it. In Numbers chapter 25, we find that the women of Midian began to seduce the men of Israel to sexual sin and to sacrifice to their gods. Since the gods of the pagans were often fertility gods, the worship often involved sexual acts. This incident is recorded in Numbers chapter 25. Israel stayed in Shittim, and the people began to play the prostitute with the daughters of Moab. For they called the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. Israel joined himself to Baal of Peor, and the anger of Yahweh was kindled against Israel. Yahweh said to Moses, "Take all the chiefs of the people and hang them up to Yahweh before the sun, that the fierce anger of Yahweh may turn away from Israel." Moses said to the judges of Israel, "Everyone kill his men who have joined themselves to Baal of Peor." Behold, one of the children of Israel came and brought to his brothers a Midianite woman in the sight of Moses and in the sight of all the congregation of the children of Israel, while they were weeping at the entrance of the tent of meeting. When Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, saw it, he rose up from the middle of the congregation and took a spear in his hand. And he went after the man of Israel into the pavilion, and thrust both of them through, the man of Israel and the woman through her body. So the plague was stayed from the children of Israel. Those who died by the plague were 24,000. So once again, Satan successfully used immorality and idolatry to snare God's people, and just in that one instance alone, it cost them 24,000 of their lives. Aside from sexual immorality and Baal worship, human sacrifice was also a common practice. Here's an artist's depiction of what that might have looked like. Sacrifices were offered in an effort to placate their gods, to kill young children and bury them in the foundations of a house or public building at the time of construction. The god Moloch is mentioned many times in the Bible, and here's a picture of the different names that he might have had. He wasn't just known by Moloch, he was Milcom, Malcolm, and many different other ones. But Moloch was just another Baal god, a god of the Canaanites, the Ammonites, Phoenicians, Carthaginians, and Syrians. The Bible contains the heartbreaking tale of child sacrifice practiced in the name of Moloch. Moloch worship, often revered as a protecting father figure. Images of Moloch were made of bronze, and their outstretched arms were heated red hot. The Moloch idol was a large hollow brass statue with the head of a bull and the bulging belly of a man. It was designed like an old-fashioned pot-bellied stove, with the belly as the firebox. A child sacrifice laid on the hands would roll into the fire in the belly cavity, Scripture describes this practice as passing through the fire to Molech in Leviticus chapter 18. Living children were then placed into the idol's hands and died there and were rolled into the fire pit below. Some sources indicate a child might also be passed through the fire prior to the actual sacrifice in order to purify or baptize the child. Molech worship often occurred in the Hinnom Valley near Jerusalem. God prohibited Israel from child sacrifice in general and Molech worship in particular in Leviticus chapter 20. We can read about that here. 20 verse 1. Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, Moreover, you are to tell the children of Israel, any one of the children of Israel or of the strangers who live as foreigners in Israel, who gives any of his seed to Molech, he must surely be put to death. The people of the land must stone him with stones. Also, I will set my face against that person and will cut him off from among his people, because he has given his seed to Molech, to defile my sanctuary and to profane my holy name. If the people of the land all hide their eyes from that person when he gives his seed to Molech, and do not put him to death, then I will set my face against that man and against his family, and will cut him off, and all who play the prostitute after him, to play the prostitute with Molech from among their people. Many other Old Testament passages affirm God's zero tolerance for this wicked child sacrifice. Later in Israel's history, the evil king Manasseh offered his own son as a sacrifice to Molech. Manasseh started his reign as co-regent with his father Hezekiah in 696 BC, with his sole reign beginning in 686, 10 years later, and continuing until his death in 642 BC. The Bible says here in 2 Kings, talks about him, it says, Manasseh was 12 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 55 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Hephzibah, and he did what was evil in the sight of Yahweh, after the abominations of the nations whom Yahweh cast out before the children of Israel. For he built again the high places that Hezekiah his father had destroyed, and he erected altars for Baal and made an Asherah, as did King Ahab of Israel, and worshipped all the army of heaven and served them. He built altars in the house of Yahweh, of which Yahweh said, I will put my name in Jerusalem. He built altars for all the army of heaven in the two courts of the house of Yahweh. He made his sons pass through the fire, and practiced sorcery, and used enchantments, and dealt with those who had familiar spirits, and with wizards. He worked much evil in the sight of Yahweh to provoke him to anger. And he set the carved image of Asherah that he had made inside the house, of which Yahweh said to David and to Solomon his son, In this house and in Jerusalem, which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, will I put my name forever. Nor will I cause the feet of Israel to wander any more out of the land that I gave their fathers, if only they will be careful to do according to all that I commanded them, and according to all the law that my servant Moses commanded them. But they did not listen, and Manasseh seduced them to do what was evil, more than the nations did, whom Yahweh destroyed before the children of Israel. Yahweh spoke by his servants the prophets, saying, Because Manasseh, king of Judah, has done these abominations, and has done wickedly above all that the Amorites did, who were before him, and has made Judah also to sin with his idols. Verse 12. Therefore this is what Yahweh the God of Israel says, Behold, I will bring such evil on Jerusalem and Judah that whoever hears of it, both his ears will tingle. I will stretch over Jerusalem the line of Samaria, and the plummet of the house of Ahab. I will wipe Jerusalem as a man wipes a dish, wiping it and turning it upside down. I will cast off the remnant of my inheritance and deliver them into the hand of their enemies. They will become a prey and a spoil to all their enemies, because they have done what is evil in my sight and have provoked me to anger, since the day their fathers came out of Egypt, even to this day. So in these verses, Yahweh foretold that Israel would be delivered into the hands of their enemies because of all of their idolatry. This occurred several times, but the final time occurred when Jerusalem was destroyed by the Babylonians, when their temple was destroyed and they were carried away into captivity in 587-586 BC. Besides Manasseh, there were many wicked kings in Israel, but King Ahaz was another one. and that's recorded in 2 Chronicles chapter 28. Here it says, Ahaz was 20 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem. And he didn't do what was right in the eyes of Yahweh like David his father, but he walked in the ways of the kings of Israel and made also cast metal images for the Baals. Moreover, he turned incense into smoke, perfume in the valley of the son of Hinnom, and burned his children in the fire, according to the abominations of the nations whom Yahweh cast out before the children of Israel. He sacrificed and turned incense into smoke perfume in the high places and on the hills and under every green tree. Therefore Yahweh his God delivered him into the hand of the king of Syria, and they struck him and carried away of his a great multitude of captives and brought them to Damascus. He was also delivered into the hand of the king of Israel, who struck him with great slaughter. For Pekah the son of Remaliah killed in Judah 120,000 in one day, all of them valiant men, because they had forsaken Yahweh, the God of their forefathers. Again, over and over, the Jews pay high prices for their idolatry, in this case 120,000 men being killed, all because they wouldn't listen to God and refused to worship false idols. The people of Judah participated in this crime against their own sons, a sin so detestable that God said it had never even crossed his mind in Jeremiah chapter 32. Here it says, They have turned their backs to me, not their faces, and though I taught them, rising up early, teaching them over and over, yet they have not listened and received instruction. But they have set their abominations in the house that is called by my name to defile it. They built the high places of Baal that are in the valley of the son of Hinnom, to cause their sons and their daughters to pass through the fire to Molech, which I did not command them, nor did it come into my mind that they should do this abomination to cause Judah to sin. Now therefore this is what Yahweh the God of Israel says concerning this city about which you say, It is given into the hand of the king of Babylon by the sword and by the famine and by the pestilence. So again, God foretells that his people would be destroyed in the future by the Babylonian Empire. But many times God used the nations to punish his people when they practiced wickedness. Today, child sacrifice is practiced throughout the world. There has been a resurgence of child sacrifice in Uganda. Witch doctors have been implemented in the mutilation death of children who were killed in an effort to bring good fortune and wealth to those willing to pay for it. There is also a correlation between child sacrifice and modern-day abortion. Unprecedented numbers of children have been sacrificed at the hands of abortionists for the sake of convenience, immorality, or pride. Planned Parenthood has killed over 7.6 million babies since it legally began performing abortions in 1973, following the Roe v. Wade decision. That's a catastrophic number, and it's easy to read 7.6 million and shrug it off, but if you really think about it, that's more than 2 times the population of Los Angeles. That's 7,600,000 humans that were never given a chance at life because of Planned Parenthood. 7,600,000 babies that never had the opportunity to celebrate a birthday. And that's not even taking into account the number of babies aborted by Planned Parenthood illegally before the Roe v. Wade decision was decided by the United States Supreme Court. Today, sick people who support abortion rights try to say life starts after birth, but this goes against God's word because the Bible clearly teaches that life starts at conception in the womb. There's one example of that in Psalm chapter 139. Here King David was praying to Yahweh, showing his appreciation for his being created. Verse 13, he says, For you yourself created my innermost parts. You wove me together in my mother's womb. I give thanks to you, for I am amazing and wonderful. Your works are wonderful, and my soul is abundantly aware of this. My bones were not hidden from you when I was made in secret, skillfully woven together in the lowest parts of the earth. The earth here speaking of obviously his mother's womb. Verse 16, Your eyes saw my embryo, and in your scroll they were all written, the days that were formed before there was any of them. Yes, how precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How mighty is their sum. There are many other scriptures that speak of life in the womb, and it's sick and twisted to think that life only counts once a child starts to breathe. But what does God say about shedding innocent blood? In Proverbs 6, verse 17, or verse 16 here, it says, "There are 6 things that Yahweh hates. Indeed, 7 things are abominations to his soul: prideful eyes, a lying tongue, and hands shedding innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked thoughts, feet that are swift to run to do evil, a false witness who breathes out lies and who sows strife among brothers." So God despises with all his being those who kill innocent people, especially in this case we're talking about children, helpless children. But we can be sure that God will judge this horrendous sin of abortion and child sacrifice in his due time. The horrific practice of child sacrifice has been committed throughout the world for thousands of years. Generally, the sacrifice of a child was intertwined with the worship of a pagan deity, often a fertility god. Worshippers sought to obtain a blessing from their god or gods, to conform or complete a vow taken in the name of their god. Ancient Aztecs and Incas and a few other peoples in South and Central America practiced child sacrifice. The same for the Druids of Europe. The city of Carthage in North Africa, you can see an artist's depiction of what that would have looked like, contains evidence of child sacrifice related to the worship of Baal Hamon, a god that was imported from Phoenicia. Many Roman writers refer to this barbaric act in Carthage. So there's a lot of historical proof for that. Lawrence Stagger and Sam Wolfe, archaeologists who had excavated the site, described it this way: "The Carthaginian Tophet is the largest of these Phoenician sites, and indeed is the largest cemetery of sacrificed humans ever discovered." The Tophet here is related to the Valley of Hinnom in the Bible. According to the Hebrew Bible, the Valley of Hinnom was used as a place for worshippers in Canaan to burn their own children alive as sacrifices to the gods Moloch and Baal. One section of the Hinnom Valley was called Tophet, where the children were slaughtered. You can find this in 2 Kings chapter 23. Here's a picture of where the Valley of Hinnom is located. It's so close to Jerusalem. No wonder this practice of child sacrifice disgusted God so much. It was so close to his temple. I mean, it's disgusting no matter where it's practiced, but to be that close to the temple is just really, really shocking. Later in King Josiah's time, this site was destroyed and properly turned into a garbage dump. The Valley of Hinnom was renamed by Yahweh himself to Valley of Slaughter in Jeremiah chapter 19, verse 6, where it says, "Therefore, behold, the days come, says Yahweh, that this place will no more be called Topheth, nor the Valley of the son of Hinnom, but the Valley of Slaughter." So many innocent deaths there, an appropriate name for it. Now back to Mr. Stager and Mr. Wolfe discussing the Carthage site. They go on to say, child sacrifice took place there almost continuously for a period of nearly 600 years. We nevertheless estimate the size of the Carthaginian Tophet during the 4th and probably 3rd centuries BC to be at the minimum between 54,000 and 64,000 square feet. Using the density of urns in our excavated area as a standard, we estimate that as many as 20,000 urns may have been deposited there between 400 and 200 BC. The excavation site involves several levels that cover time periods from 800 BC to about 146 BC. Earlier dates are below the water level and not accessible. Each level consists of urns that contain the charred bones of children, both boys and girls, from newborn to 3 years old, mixed in with charred bones of goats and sheep. These burnt sacrifices were made to Tanit and Baal Hamon, the patron goddess and the god of Carthage. Tanit is the equivalent of Astarte in Canaan. Some say Baal Hamon is the equivalent of the high god El, but in Canaan, Astarte was the consort not of El, but of Baal. So Baal Hamon is most likely the equivalent of the Canaanite Baal Hadad. So this ugly picture in Carthage gives us an idea of the extent that child sacrifice was practiced in ancient times and how horrendous it was. Archaeologists have confirmed firsthand the slaughter of innocent children that took place there. Yahweh used the prophet Elijah in the Bible to humble the prophets of Baal. This story is in Elijah chapter 18. Let's read this story together here. Verse 20. So Ahab sent to all the children of Israel and gathered the prophets together to Mount Carmel. And Elijah came near to all the people and said, How long will you waver between two opinions? If Yahweh is God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him. But the people answered him not a word. Then Elijah said to the people, I, even I only, am left of the prophets of Yahweh. But Baal's prophets are 450 men. Now let them get 2 bulls for us, and let them choose 1 bull for themselves, and cut it in pieces and lay it on the wood, but put no fire under it. And I will prepare the other bull and lay it on the wood and put no fire under it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will then call on the name Yahweh. The God who answers by fire, he is God. And all the people answered, What you say is good. Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, Choose 1 bull for yourselves and prepare it first, for you are many. And call on the name of your God, but put no fire under it. They took the bull that was given them, and they dressed it and called on the name of Baal from morning until noon, saying, Baal, hear us. But there was no voice, nor any who answered. They leaped around the altar that was made. It came to pass at noon that Elijah mocked them and said, Shout loudly, for he is a god. Either he is deep in thought, or he is gone aside, or he is on a journey, or perhaps he is sleeping and must be awakened. They cried out loudly and cut themselves in their way with knives and spears until the blood gushed out of them. It was so when midday was past that they prophesied until the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice, but there was neither voice, nor any to answer, nor any who regarded. Then Elijah said to all the people, Come near to me. And all the people came near to him. And he repaired the altar of Yahweh that was torn down. Elijah took 12 stones according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Israel, to whom the word of Yahweh came, saying, Israel will be your name. And with the stones he built an altar in the name of Yahweh. He made a trench around the altar large enough to contain 2 measures of seed. And he put the wood in order and cut the bull in pieces and laid it on the wood. And he said, Fill 4 jars with water and pour it on the burnt offering and on the wood. And he said, Do it a 2nd time. And they did it a 2nd time. And he said, Do it a 3rd time. And they did it a 3rd time. And the water ran around the altar, and he also filled the trench with water. It came to pass at the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice that Elijah the prophet came near and said, Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your word. Hear me, Yahweh, hear me, so that this people will know that you, Yahweh, are God, and that you have turned their heart back again. Then the fire of Yahweh fell and consumed the burnt offering and the wood and the stones and the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. When all the people saw it, they fell on their faces, and they said, Yahweh, he is God. Yahweh, he is God. And Elijah said to them, Seize the prophets of Baal. Do not let one of them escape. They seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon and killed them there. Following this event, Yahweh finally ended the drought and sent rain upon the land of Israel. The miraculous event of fire from heaven was an answer to the prayer of Elijah. God was seeking to turn the hearts of his people back to himself. He used the time of drought to get their attention, and then through his prophet performed a dramatic miracle right before their eyes. No one who witnessed that event doubted that Yahweh was God and that Baal was a powerless, deaf, dumb, and blind idol. The repentance of the Israelites was soon followed by God's provision of rain. So God humbled those idolaters back in Elijah's day, and he will do so again soon at the return of Christ. So make sure you have nothing to do with idols unless you want to become just like them. That choice is yours to make. Okay, I'm going to end this video here. But in part 3 of this series on idolatry, I will discuss how idolatry actually divided the 12-tribe nation of Israel. And we will be taking a look at the kings of Israel and their effect on the nation. So stay tuned for that, and thanks very much for watching.